Okay, hello world, and welcome to our live session. It is 7:30 in Kiev and in Tallinn, and 12:30 for Francesca in the US,
Hello.
5:30 to Matteo from England. We got a very international session today, and my name is Ina. I'm taking care of community and events at Lift 99 Kiev Hub. Lift 99 is the most vibrant startup community with two physical locations in Kiev and in Tallinn. We opened our doors to help early stage founders change the world and enter the international startup ecosystem map. What we do, we are building a community of like-minded people, organize one-on-one sessions with the best international investors. We do closed founders events, fireside chats, and many more. And we are a startup one-stop shop, aiming to help you build your amazing product and support your mission to make this world even more awesome place to be with your idea and your solution. And tonight we're gonna talk about some product design together with amazing sketch advocates, Francesca and Matteo. If you guys have any questions, write them under the video. We will be covering them on the go. And we will also have a Q&A session in the end. So let's get started.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear us?
Yes, let's start from the let's start from the basics. Yes, if you can hear us, first of all, okay, I'm Francesco. I'm in New York, as Ina said. Thank you for the warm welcome, Ina. And as design advocates at Sketch, we help teams of any size make the most of Sketch, understanding how you can improve your Sketch skills, but also how you can implement all the way to design systems, automation, pretty much anything related to Sketch and productivity and design system and building products. Today, we're going to focus on some of how to set up properly a design system to build a product over time. But one thing, before we jump into that, I'd love to get a little sense, if possible, from people who are watching, if you have built a design system, if you're looking to build one, where are you at with Sketch, just so we can kind of plan a little better what we can, we'll discuss the details and how we're going through. And also we want to make a conversation. So feel free to ask questions in the chat and we'll try to answer as they come along. And Ina will definitely help moderate that part. Matteo, I don't know you want to say hi too? I'm just
of course. You always steal my presentation. No, I'm joking. I and Francesco are working together all day long. Actually, all the overlap long because I'm in the UK. But we are both Italians. That's quite crazy. The two design advocates in Sketch are Italians. So please feel free to interrupt us with your questions. Ina, please interrupt us yourself.
Certo.
Let's start, Francesco. Sorry?
Ina, parli italiano?
Un poco.
Allora, ok, parliamo solo italiano. Da ora in poi sarà un meetup solo in italiano.
Yeah.
Ok.
We're joking.
Kidding. Okay, let me see. I think I can share the screen, but I'd love to. Ina, are you getting feedback in the chat? We cannot see it ourselves, so let us know if
Yeah, sure.
If there's any questions coming through.
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. Okay. So I'll start sharing my screen in the meantime. Okay, down here. And just let me know when you can see my screen.
We don't see it yet.
Should be coming through. Now I see it there. Yeah, perfect. Loving this Restream, by the way. It's the first time we're using it to do something like this. So really, so far, looking great. Okay, so I have not heard feedback yet, but the assumption is that you heard the concept of components when designing your products. And you're also a little familiar with Sketch as a design tool. In Sketch, you can design starting from very simple like iconography all the way to designing really big websites or applications. The concept is that you have pages and artboards. This is an artboard. And then you can start designing UI. Each artboard is a screen of your interface. This is taking away the really basic things, and you use probably other design tools. The concept is for today is to create a design system, which usually is not only a set of components that is for sure that made of colors, typography. You can see we listed some of the placeholder items that are part of pretty much every design system, of, if you will, core components of a design system. So colors, logos, so branding, typography, icons, some elements for prototyping. And then you can see there's all the other components type that you would normally find in any app, any application, from buttons, forms, etc. You can go to town with this. It's good to start with something that at least includes typography and colors and buttons, etc. That elements you'll be using the most. If you never create a design system, you'll have to build it over time, and it will evolve. And it needs to be treated as a product itself. Meaning it needs to have the right resources. Depends on the company size. You might have to, kind of go back and forth and design something, explore it, get to a prototyping phase, understand if people like it, and then bring it back and normalize it, make it part of the design system. But the design system is not just the design aspect of it. It's also all the nomenclature that you'll be using for. And by the way, you can see Matteo and I in the same document. We're live collaborating. We're both on a Mac, but using our server to piggyback and stream to each other what the changes are that we're making in this document. The point of the design system is about having a common language between everybody involved in a team, that being designers, developers, product people, QA, anybody involved, so that whenever you're talking about a color, like a headline or a typography element or button, some people are not calling it like just a button. Some people are calling it a primary call to action, but figuring out that common language that will speed up the communication between people. And this gets even more important when you cannot point at a screen because you're not sitting next to each other if you're working remotely. So that is the key part, is the common language. So the next step is then to make sure that as you build components, like it can be colors, it can be buttons, etc., that those elements will be reflected in your code counterpart, so that not only you can agree on what that means, but also can be easily implemented from the developer. Because if you decide that there's a button on the UI and it's a primary call to action, the developer knows exactly how to insert that, knows all the rules about how to use the button, especially how the button will behave on hover, state, pressing it, and etc. I'm trying to do it really quick because we have about 45 minutes, an hour. So, but if you have any questions, please shoot them in the chat. Again, I cannot see the chat, but please, Ina, bring those questions up. And Matteo, I know I went really fast. Did I skip anything?
Here we are. Sorry, I was muted as usual, and I wasn't able to click on it. No, I believe you mentioned everything. Well, another thing that is important for design system is that they are related also with all the kind of interactions you can have. Mm-hmm. So we are going to go with best practices on managing buttons, for instance, later on. And yeah, we're going to explain how to organize them in order to speed up your workflow, so to create super quick prototypes. But yeah, I believe you cover everything, Francesco.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to go a little fast because I know that this is being recorded too. So if you have to refer back to it, you'll be able to do so. But so let's say here we're cheating a little bit. We already have a set of colors that we want to use. Some might be our primary colors. They're coming from our brand. Let's say we've done already some branding exercises, or at least our initial assumptions about those colors. The nice thing about setting colors the way we're showing it right now is that you'll be able to change your mind later on. And if you set them up properly, you'll be able to update the color once and update everywhere in your designs. So that's why it's good to start from something that feels like this, even though this might not be your final color. And we'll be sharing these documents later too, so you can actually download them and play with it. So let's say I have two primary colors, and then I have black. Let's say now is a not, as you can see, is not like just pure black. It has an opinion, if you will, about this black. And then you have other colors that are going to be used for typography, for example, and then some other colors that are going to be used for, they usually have a meaning about like warning or success or an error, right? And those colors are intentionally pretty standard because we want to convey those, we want to reserve those colors for those kind of communication with our, and pretty much with our consumers of the app or the application or the system. In general, those colors, shouldn't be necessarily changed too much, and that's why they have clear labels as well. Now, naming those colors is something that also will help start creating the concept of tokens. You might have heard of color tokens or design tokens in general. There's two types of tokens. One is a choice or option token, and these, let's say, are mostly these ones are the first ones are mostly option tokens, means something I can choose. This one I would categorize them more as a decision token. The meaning of the token of that color is already embedded in the name itself. So, but one thing we want to do first is create. I'm just going to pick these two colors and create a color scale, because usually you want not only the primary color, let's say, but then you need some other shades to be able to create a UI that is interesting enough and where you can define different levels of priority in your interface. So now, for example, I'm going to use a plugin. I could do it by hand, just duplicating things like this, one, blah, blah, like this, and then go and choose colors from here one at a time, right? But there's tools and there's plugins out there that allow you to generate these automatically. There's online tools to go and generate some of the scales. But for example, create a quick tool here that is, I'm going to send the link later on. It's called FreeFlow. That allows you to batch create some of these things, including color scale. So in this case, I'm going to batch create a color scale. And I can choose some of the steps in the color scale. This example really has just two options. We'll be improving this in the future, but just wanted to give you an idea. So by these predefined steps, now I can run the plugin. And as you can see, it generates a pretty acceptable scale colors that goes from something light, but not too light, to something that's darker than the original color. And as you can see, the original color, I believe, was this 500. If I go back, you see that this color here is this one. And if I rerun the plugin, that color is, that one, which is the 500. So that means that we basically use this color as the middle of the scale, and we are going to have situations where we want to have darker colors for and lighter ones. So now that we created these colors, and as you can see, they all have the correct name associated with it, we can easily create now what they're called color variables in Sketch. The color variables are something that I can go here basically and say, I want this color to be reusable, and I'm going to add it to this document here. So I could click create color variable, and I could give it a name. By default, though, the name, if you do it this way, picks up the name of the X value, which is totally fine. You probably would like to rename it manually to primary color and give it a 500 there. But we have, again, sped up that workflow by being able to just run a plugin that will automatically create color variables for each of these items in one shot. So again.
Oh no, I know. I'm going to jump in. Sorry.
Okay. Yes.
We got a question here. So Igor is asking, just curious about the progress when you work on the beginning of the design system and start to fill in the gaps and requests from other teams, design and engineers. How you manage to get requests and take actions on them to the actual components? And a bit more from the side of the organization work, how to manage the documentation for the components. I think we can probably take this one to the Q&A session, or if you want to cover it right now, that will.
Yeah, no, I think that alone is a big conversation, but I think in this case, Matteo, do you want to punt on this and we do it later?
Yeah, there are, maybe later is better because we are talking about this starting, but I understand why Igor is asking it right now, because we were starting to create a design system, or actually the design part of it. So there are a lot of different approaches. It really depends on when you are starting. If you already have like a product and you have to create a system in order to maintain it in the future, or to increase its size in the future, or to develop it in the future, etc., is one thing. If you are starting from scratch with a complete new product, etc., maybe you already have like a brand design idea or some style guides, and that's a starting point. The other bit that is important to me is, usually we are trying, and in my experience, I always try to start small, with small things that can give us and the company and the developers an idea of what a design system means and how it can help the entire company to better produce quickly and with more consistency between the things, and also to avoid the recreation of the same thing plenty of times, because in the end, what a component is a way to not to repeat and reinvent the wheel continuously. So if you got a button, the button is always the same for both designers and developers. Developers needs just to change, I don't know, the text on the button. For designers is the same, but the code that is behind it will be the same. And also the interactions that are related with that button are the same all the times. So I would always start with small quick wins, like buttons, again, because they are used everywhere. They are the main way to interact with an interface usually. It depends from the interface, of course, but in the majority of times this is the way where I would start, because you've got buttons everywhere, so they will be reused continuously. They are even quite a small component that don't require too much, so it could be quite a quick win for both designers and developers. And then from there, of course, it really depends on what you have and what you have to do. The other thing that is important is, if you already have a product with interface, etc., is to try to analyze what you have and define which are the main topics and the main components that you have to that you're using more continuously. I don't know, again, buttons, but could be form, checkboxes, text fields, or maybe tables or cards. It really depends from the product you have, and then start from there. Sorry, Francesco.
Yeah, no. Igor was saying, it seems that there's already obviously a team in place, and so you're not starting from scratch. Here we're showing you how to start from scratch, but you might have to play catch up with a product that's already existing, and so you might have to turn those products from different teams into something reusable. And I think Igor was saying design systems are coming up.
Is the requests then. So in that case, my experience, the best way to proceed is to try to involve the different teams, if you've got different teams. So,
and go through all the elements that they need. Try to see how much overlap there is between those products, and different teams may be dealing with completely different products. Understand if you really can serve everybody with the same component, or a product, let's say, that is for TV needs to have a component that is just for them, and it might feel like it's extra, but it is a very different platform. So for that, you might have to do something like that. I think that's what. And then the documentation aspect is a separate question. That is a big part of the design system. At the moment within Sketch, there's not an explicit way to do it. There's some companies, even large ones, that literally create for each page, also show for each component, also show how that should be used. And then they either export it to a PDF or export it to our cloud, and other people can refer to it as when it's documentation alone. Then you might have heard a company using things like even InVision DSM, that allows to create documentation in a more structured way, or going all the way to Storybook, which is a way not only to create documentation, but also to kind of create that strong handshake with developers. So it depends where you're at with your system. You might want to get to the next level. At a certain point, we'll be getting probably integration with Storybook, or making it easier to integrate with Storybook as well. At the moment within Sketch, we don't really handle the documentation aspect, but you obviously can design an artboard and lay out examples of the components you created and describe how it should behave. With that said, there are also other tools that can help you with that in a more structured fashion. But this year we'll be working on, say, tools for communicating design systems. So they will be easier to represent components in cloud. Now, everything that we are showing, this is already in cloud.
There is another one. Sorry.
No.
Yeah, so there is another question about things that you're doing right now. What is the name of this plugin which creates the tone shades automatically?
Okay, so the plugin you'll see me use a lot today. These plugins with the rainbow here are all plugins I created and working on. Free Flow is the one we're using today. I can't remember exactly, so I keep adding things to it. I might have to release a version. The version that is live at free-flow.co already has 90% of the features you see here. If not, we'll be publishing later today, so I'll send a link to download it. Constantly evolving it. As you can see, it can do a lot of things in batch, and we'll be going through many of these today. But yeah, we don't use just my plugin. There's also plenty of other plugins out there. Matteo will show a plugin he made to create buttons, and we can send a link later to that as well.
Yeah, that would be very cool.
I'm sorry?
Sharing a link later would be very cool. And to all who have just joined our video, if you have any questions, please write them below wherever you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube. We'll be happy to cover your questions.
Perfect. You're welcome, Alka and Igor. Thank you. And now I can see their chat. So the next step for us is to create what I was mentioning as color variables. You might have heard of color tokens. In Sketch, they're called color variables at the moment. You can basically select all these, run the plugin, free flow, batch create, and then batch create document colors and vars from the selected elements. So this will take all the colors of the fills, and we'll take the names and actually create color variables. You see, it created 26 color variables. I could have done it by hand, would have taken quite a bit longer. And now when I go in, if I go into this mode with Control-2, I actually can see the things that are already created in my document. Some are things that were already created before. Matteo might have added it. You can see already some components here. I'm looking at all the symbols. If I click here, I can see I can go through other like textiles and layer styles. At the moment, we've not created any of those, so I'll show you how to create those. But we created colors. So all the colors that we created here, they're already organized. And I could go and group them differently. Let's say all these, I want them to be, I can select like this, and like I'll hold Shift and select this other one and do Command G, and now create a group and call it primary. And so now they're a little more organized, and I could do the same thing for the secondary ones. So I'll select these, scroll down, and then Shift G, and then here call it secondary. It's always good to be organized and create categories. It will make it easier for everybody to find things when they're navigating the system. And also,
the system is an engineerization of the UI. So we have to act a bit as engineers, if you want, particularly in the organization of files. And actually, maybe we can go through also how we organize the file later on, because we didn't go through that too much in depth. But yeah, we have to be organized. Otherwise, nobody can find things. So this is the reason why naming conventions are important, but also to organize everything properly so then it can be reused and find in an easy way.
And one extra tip is also that at the moment Sketch organizes things automatically alphabetically, so you want to leverage that. In some cases, if you want to force something to appear at the beginning of a list or at the bottom of the list, you can either use number for, let's say, 00 or 01 for something to show at the very top for things you use most often. And instead, for things you want to almost hide in this list, you could put a Z in front of it or an asterisk that will push it to the bottom of the list. I'm not going to keep organizing things, but you saw the gist. And I can always now, if I wanted to, just click here and click Insert Shape with Color, and I'll be inserting a shape as a starting point that already has the color variable applied. And you can tell it's applied because when I go here, there's a check mark that's already showing that as applied. So now all these other ones, they have the colors have been created but not applied yet. So I'm gonna run another plugin that it's an official plugin from Sketch. It's called Color Variables Migrator. They will just associate each of these colors variables with the matching value. So this is good if you already have a system and never use color variables. It's a step you want to do. You first want to create the color variables, and then this will actually use the color variables and apply them. Same thing for styles. In this case, we don't have the styles yet, so we'll just do it for the color variables. Okay, so running the plugin. So now when I go and select these, now they all have the color applied. So I can pick anything else, let's say here, and also see the color applied. So that's sweet. That would have taken also quite a bit of time if I had to do it manually. Now the next step is for us to create not only colors, but let's say styles. Styles matching this will make it easier to apply those colors to, let's say, a background. Now, a lot of people ask, oh, why should I use a single color style sometimes? And that's true. A lot of times you could use color variables instead of styles. But as I said before, the color variables are usually more used for color tokens that are an option, and styles will actually give you an opportunity to associate meaning with it. Now, we're going to do something that seems maybe an in-between, which is also creating styles for these. So again, now selected these, they have the same name as before. Here, I'm going to call it styles and rerun the plugin, but instead of generating colors, we'll be generating styles. So we create text and layer styles from selected elements. As you can see, the same command will work if I had text layers. We'll also pick up the properties of the text layer and create textiles. If I will go back here now, I have the same colors that before, but as layer styles. And I can modify them in batch here. If I wanted to add, let's say, a shadow to all these colors, I could decide to start giving different names to some of these or duplicate them, because let's say I want to create a background, and a background for, let's say, a card would have a background color. Yeah. That would be the primary color. Then I could use another color variable for a border, and I could use a different color variable for a shadow. So that's how a style allows you to combine multiple color variables into one.
Yeah, and in the meantime, Francesco is working on those things. Now I'm going to create some styles that I will need later on for the buttons. What important things to mention here is that color variables can be applied to the different part of the style. So you can have a color variables on the fill or more fills. You can have a color variable applied to the borders. You can have a color variables applied to other things. So a style, as Francesco mentioned, is not only a decision token, if you want, but is also a collection of variables. And I'm going to use that in order to create the styles for the buttons. And this file will be shared later on as well on not only the plugins, so you will be able to access it. Right. And so you can see what we are doing and how we organize things later on.
And then there's another question from Igor about the naming convention. And I kind of skipped through some of these things. So you might be familiar, we might have heard, if you tried to do systems before, you might have tried to come up with some groupings that make sense. And in the way you do it in Sketch, before we had this is components browser, you had to give very long names to your items and add a slash in between. Now, that is still happening behind the scenes, but Sketch, we are doing it automatically for you. So the moment you select, let's say, these, you select a bunch of styles like this and do Command G, we're actually adding group to the name itself. So if I were to insert this here, then you would see that here says this document in group. Obviously, that group is not useful, so that's why we want you to name things correctly. Just select this or actually, once you have a group, you just double click here and say, this is the primary. So now the suggestion is, that can become very personal. You want to understand, for example, if you're supporting themes or not supporting themes in your UI. That would be something that would use at the very root sometimes of if you have a complete split in your system where you have 100% component, one dark and 100% let's say light, you would probably have that at the very root of the naming convention. If you instead only have a few components that will change between light and dark, then you would probably add that towards the end on the name of the component. There's also other aspects to it that are not just about the slash to create categories, but also for the different states of a component. Usually, for example, a button can have an active state, can have we will talk more about these when we show the buttons, but basically the active states are more usually referred to have modifiers, let's say, and so you use a dash dash and then the name of it. The important thing at the end of the day is that whatever naming convention you use is both consistent between you and everybody else on the product team and the developers, so that when they look at it, they know that that's already a component, so they don't even need to look at the specs for that color, for that item. They know that they already have a counterpart equivalent in their code. One thing I wanted to point out is there's different phases of a design system. There's a phase where it's mostly in the hands of the design team because it's being created from scratch. Then there's a moment when it becomes more of a hybrid because it's becomes more of an agreement with developers, and meaning the developers already have a counterpart. But then there's also another phase where now there's a little bit of code and design is usually a little ahead to create the next components. You want to make sure that you already established some good working relationship with the developers by that point. And ideally, you establish these rules even before you impose anything on the developers. You'll be able to work much better with a development team that has bought into these conventions. And usually, honestly, they are the ones that have been following the stricter rules for much longer, because in code, they had to adopt these naming conventions for much longer than designers had to. So finding that agreement will make it easier to make changes or add new components. Everybody will follow the same conventions. So you'll be able to just add new components, and everybody will understand, okay, this is a new version of an input field that now has an icon on the right, because we established this convention that, let's say, you give the name of the component and then with icon or icon right, something like that, but it's always consistent. The developers will be able literally to type in the name without having to look at who knows what documentation. Documentation is great, but also means that people have to go and read it up all the time. And at least as a designer, I know I'm also dyslexic. I know that it is hard, and it's hard for everybody. So as much as you can use conventions, they're easy to remember and to adopt, that will also make it easier for everybody to use the system. And there's one thing that people don't talk enough about is, yes, you come up with rules, but they need to be somewhat easy to follow. Otherwise, everybody will try to break them all the time. And the people need to, the team at large needs to have bought in to the concept. Matteo, sorry, okay. Igor seems to, yep. You're welcome, Igor. Matteo, anything else about conventions or we should add here?
It can go for the entire night. To me, what is important is also to add one tiny thing.
We have plenty of time,
Yeah. We love to talk together about those things, so we are passionate about that. One important thing to mention is that naming conventions are not only related with the proper development of things, but with everything else. So a design system can be seen as something that is going over the actual idea of a product, can be related also with marketing, sales, and other things. And everyone will need to understand what something means. So if you mention and you name something properly and everyone is able to refer to it properly, there will be no miscommunication, which is something that happens continuously, unfortunately. I don't know if you think part of the design system could be illustrations. If you got a set of illustration, marketing, designers, developers, also, I don't know, sale, need to know which illustration means what in order to use it properly. The same with iconography, the same with a lot of things. And this is something that sometimes we forgot. Of course, this means that also the design system is growing a lot, is bigger than just for a product, and is part of the culture of the entire company. But it's something that we see a lot more often lately. It's something that a lot of companies are going into. So, and the naming convention from scratch is something that is difficult to analyze. So, for instance, what I did in the past when I was in the field doing that was to make proper user research internal of my company, because who is servicing from a design system, as Francesco mentioned at the beginning, a design system is a product itself. It requires user research as well. And so what I did was to interview people to try to understand what their needs were. Also for documentation, we were talking about documentation before. When I had to write the documentation, I tried to understand which is the starting point for the documentation for different kind of stakeholders and servicers from the documentation itself. And I found out that for designers and developers, it was actually related with the idea of atomic things. So they actually started usually from the tiniest element and going bigger and bigger and bigger to the templates or the pages. Whether from other stakeholders, it was exactly the opposite. So they were starting from the idea of the page, the template of the page, and then they were nailing down to the small atoms only if needed. And so this kind of research helped me to reorganize and restructure the documentation in order to fulfill the different requirements. But of course, this is difficult. And this, again, is going through everything, and also for the naming. There is an amazing Slack channel I and Francesco are into, which is design systems. This is not managed by Sketch, it's a general one. And one of the challenges is naming is hard. Because it is actually hard, and there are a lot. Every day there are questions. How are you naming? I don't know, this thing, and plenty of people are naming the same thing in different ways, and they perceive a name with different nuances. And when you've got something that is big, the nuances are important. So it is interesting and is important to research in the area, and to ask. If you're working only with developers, because at the beginning, this is usually the starting point for a design system, is to make easier to work between designers and developers. Right. At least interview the developers and then see how they perceive a name. Do they understand primary? Do they understand secondary? Do they prefer to have something else? Do we, as a company, prefer to have something that is different than primary, secondary? Do we want it called primary call to action color or something like that? I don't know. It really depends. It really depends from the company, the team, people that are involved, the product, and the projects you have. But it is a super interesting topic.
And yeah, I mean, as Matteo said, we could go on forever. So let's just we can all circle back to it if there's more questions around it. But let's move on now to creating textiles, for example. In Sketch, you can create a text layer just by pressing T and enter some text and changing the property on the side. In this case, what we're going to do, because we are creating a typography scale, at least as a starting point, we are going to generate with a similar tool, like a typography scale. In this case, we only have to define what would be the baseline for this scale. In this case, as you can see, I'm using a font Open Sans. Everybody can download it regular. So when you open the file, you won't have any issues. Obviously, in Sketch, you can load also your proprietary fonts. You just need to make sure that then they're going to be displayable, usable in the end platform that you choose to, for your own app, if in iOS or if it's Android, etc., or if it's web. So here I could change the properties. And this would be my baseline. In this case, I'm going to assign the color that we chosen for black before, so that when I generate the scale, will be applied to every element in the scale. I can always make changes. In Sketch, it's very easy to select multiple things and modify them. So in this case, I'm going to run the plugin again, free flow, and batch create typography scale. Here you'll see you have a few more options in terms of what kind of scale you want. I like things that are a little generous, not too tight in terms of not too close to each other. And then, as you can see, I also chosen a line height, because the relationship between the type size and line height will be preserved for all the other, let's say from H1 and below that we're creating. I can always go and modify it manually, but this is now created for me a bunch of different styles. Sorry, a bunch of different text layers. As you can see, they're all being named with a convention that we think is pretty useful, which is not only the group name at the beginning, but also reminding you that, okay, that's an H1, and then that is a left align. At the very moment in Sketch, you do have to create different styles per alignment, but something this year we'll be releasing is the ability to separate, to make the alignment optional, so that you can go and just create a fewer sets of textiles if you want to allow your designers to be a little more flexible. But it's rare that you want every possible permutations of text and color in your apps. You want to have some kind of control. So Sketch at the moment allows you to control exactly what combination of, let's say, alignment and color you want to have. So you can see all these have the same color variable applied. And now I can just go and select all these. You've seen this before. You probably understand where I'm going. I can select all these and run the plugin again and batch create. Not layer styles, text and layer styles from selected elements. Again, that's why it's important that naming convention that was used, because I'll find those names already later on. And Matteo will be able to leverage them when he builds some buttons, for example. Now, Matteo, do you want me to create a few extra styles just for the button? Or you have them already?
I already did.
Okay, so that's fine. So basically, I could have just duplicated some of these and...
so you mean the typography? No, they don't have the typography of buttons at the moment. So
okay, so I'll just create those. And one thing in Sketch, you can select multiple of these. For example, let's say I want to be bold for H1s. You see, all these are now what is called a dirty style. You don't want to have dirty styles in general in Sketch because it creates some updates, side effects, if somebody updates it by mistake. So you actually now, I'm just going to click one here and we'll update everywhere. I could also decide to apply a different color, let's say to, these. I wanted to choose a different color, let's say gray. For whatever reason, I want it a little lighter. I could just go again and update it. So now if I had already applied these styles to any of my designs, the designs would already have updated automatically. And if I distributed this document that, as you can see, is called a library, if I distribute it, everybody else would be getting those updates and their design would update automatically. So it's good to define those styles in the beginning, even if they're not 100% correct, because it will make it much easier down the line to make those changes. Obviously, it depends where you're at. Sometimes you come from a product that already exists and you are asked to create a design system. In that case, those colors are going to be already available to you. And you can literally ask the developers to give you, okay, what naming convention are you using? What are those color variables? And you can just import them into Sketch. Again, we'll share also this other plugin. You can just import, you could paste in here the names and the values, and the color variables will be generated for you automatically. In this case, is extracting the ones I already showed you before that I generated, and I could just copy this and give it to a developer, and they would have instead either the new values or just the right names to use for their what they're coding. Okay, so one thing Matteo and I agreed is to actually add a button. So here I'm going to call it button text. And okay, and here I'm going to change this style. I'm going to call it button. And then I don't want to, for buttons, I'm not going to buttons. And then, so you can see I can name things here correctly because I want to generate a style afterwards that will pick that name. Otherwise, I could also change it later on. But in this case, I'm going to do it directly here. And then button text. Okay, so that's applied. Here, you see it's still associated to the previous style because I just duplicated this. So I just need to detach it. And Matteo, what color do you want me to associate to this button? Are you starting with white or?
I'm using the I'm using the primary, so probably with the the primary as background, the primary 500. Okay, so I believe white is okay.
Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to pick that. Now, obviously, it's not visible for this specific background. So if you were to design this and you want to be a reference for the rest of the team, you just create a rectangle and you send it to the background. Whoops. And you send it to the background. Let me make it a little bigger. And so you can see now, if I were to create styles for all the other alignments, I just have, once I publish this page, will actually be visible to everybody else. So now we have button text. I'm going to just create, I could do it just clicking here, and they will pick up also the name of the layer. So I can do it this way, or I can run the plugin. I could run the plugin in general. For the interest of time now, I'm just going to, only thing is picks up also the style, and I don't want that to be so like that. So I'm just going to rename it. So now I have a style that Matteo, whenever I want to know what another designer is doing within Sketch, I can just, first of all, I can see their presence here. If I were to click on him, I could start following him, and they would, now I get this badge here, and I can see what Matteo is doing. Matteo was working on icons for prepping for the next step, but now it's going to show how to create buttons. And so then if he goes to a separate page, I'll be able to then see how he creates those buttons. Matteo, anything else you want me to create for your next step? You have styles for the background of the button?
No, it should be here. So let's go to the button page. Even if I'm with a plugin now, I'm creating a new page. But so I'm gonna jump on that page later on. So okay. Because this plugin I created has been created to add buttons directly to a project files usually, not to a file or complex already organized like this one.
And sorry to interrupt, but so now I'm showing you how I can follow another designer. The difference though is because we are doing this presentation is better if we switch to Matteo's screen, so you can share his screen and you can see what he's actually building. And so I'll be supporting Matteo in any other changes we have to make, but at least you see his interface. So I'll stop sharing my screen for the time being, and so Matteo should become a primary presenter.
Yeah, it should be, yes. Oh, I'm dark.
It's okay, actually better, so we can show, both of
them. Perfect. So yeah, I'm in the page here. Usually, you will create buttons just with rectangles and textile, text layer, etc., put them together. And then you have to duplicate them to have all the different styles and different states, and apply all those things manually. So because I and Francesco are working with educational contents as well, I created this plugin that helps to create buttons on the fly with all the states already organized. We also agreed with Francesco on a sort of organization for the different states in order to avoid to overwhelm designers with too many different states where they are not needed. And so I'm just going to show you to you. I've got this plugin here. It creates a page named buttons here, and I'm going to move them later on in the right page. And with this plugin, you can decide which kind of button you want to create, a button only with text with icon, or only an icon. If you want to use create a button that automatically stretch itself, or you want to create one that is fixed size, so you have to stretch it manually. Then, of course, based on those two options, you can define if you want padding, if it's smart layout, or if you want the fixed width. If it is fixed in size, then you can select the height, the kind of corners you want. They are square, they are circle, or they've got a specific value. And then the style, if they are existing styles, or if you want to create a new style from scratch, because maybe you are in a new project, you don't have a style, and it automatically creates the styles for you. And actually, I can show you later on what is happening with that. So let's create one with a text button with a smart layout. I want 16 pixels padding. They are already in, and a 40 pixels high button, just to replace the original values, but they will be applied automatically. But maybe, I don't know, I want a specific value here. I want an 8 pixels corner in all the different corners. Then I want to apply some existing styles. So which kind of backgrounds do I want? I created the buttons, as you can see, button primary default, button secondary default. This is, again, a naming convention we decided to follow. If you create new styles, it will create something similar for you. And then the text, automatically it received the button text that Francesco created. Then when I hit it, it will create for me automatically all the buttons already organized. We can go even a bit more crazier with the idea of how to organize the different elements. But as you can see, it automatically created the buttons with the different status. I got the one default, hover, press, tab, disable. And in the backgrounds, I already have the styles applied. I only selected the default because it's the main focus that we have as designers when we are creating a button. But because I already had all the different styles, it automatically applied the different styles, finding them in the list of styles. So primary pressed, primary tab, primary disabled. And the same thing is for the text. It found automatically that we already have a text style, and it applied it to the button. If I insert one of those buttons here, and I'm going to change the text to whatever I want. So I don't know, long text for button here. It automatically resizes itself, maintaining the 16 pixels padding that I organized here, and I required when I created the buttons. The reason of that is that, again, this is for educational conventions. I applied automatically smart layout here, and I also applied the pinning options and the fixed size options for the different elements based on what we need. Another thing that I want to point out, because we were talking previously about the fact that you can and you have to create also the interactions. You can create hotspots directly into your symbols. So then every single time you create an instance of that symbols, you can actually connect it with something else, and it will automatically create the link in your prototype. So this is a very quick way to manage things, particularly when you have got complex systems like, I don't know, tables or forms. If you've got a lot of item and you want to and you create a symbol with nested symbols inside, and you want automatically to be able to select different targets for different items, this is the way to manage it. So just let me try and see if I didn't destroy my plugin to create one also with icons. Maybe I create a fixed one with 120 pixels here in size, 40 pixels again. I want this to be again with the same thing, because of course it will work with the same style. Primer default, button text, create a button, and I have my buttons. Yeah, I destroyed them, as you can see. No, I didn't. It's just that the button is bigger. So
right, I was going to say, I think the button was only
120 is too small within the icons as well. Yeah. I agree.
But you see, the one thing about learning about automation and some of these things makes it a lot less painful to redo things, because once you become familiar with the tool and with some of the automation best practices, you say, okay, you want to change, this color everywhere? Not a problem. I just, if you set it up properly, you do it everywhere. Or you can find and replace colors within Sketch and say, and replace it that way. Or you just rerun a plugin and you just get the exact result you wanted. Manually would have taken a long time to create all these. So sorry.
Yeah, no problem. As you can see, it created automatically a button. In this case, the alignment is automatic because it's based on the fixed size I placed for the button. If I rerun the plugin and I place like 16 pixels here and with Smart Layout applied, it will work again like this one with 16 pixels. As you can see, layout here is none because they should be stretched manually. One interesting thing is that I placed here only a placeholder for the icons because I actually can't know which kind of icon you want, but you can select, replace with, and in this document we've got icons and I can select which kind of icon I want. I don't know, I select one just to have it inside my symbol, and then I want to change it to be white. Done. Oops, I didn't select the others, maybe.
With Command Shift, you can select multiple elements across multiple boards. So that's,
and also with Command Shift, with Command Click, you also have like a pass through. So if you, as you can see here, I've got groups, but with Command Shift, I can just pass through the group content, like if it was selected here, select group content on click, which is something I don't like particularly because I can't select the groups then. So I prefer to use Command Click when it's needed to go directly deep into the group, into the last level of the group available. And now I've got this button, and if I insert the button, I don't know if you ever use the insert panel. It's just pressing C on your keyboard. So in this case, I'm going to take this button. It is fixed, so if I'm going to change the size, the text, home, it is fixed, and I can stretch it manually, and it works. Now maybe I can recreate the same thing with Smart Layout so you can see how it works. Easy buttons. So the last time I'm going to do it, promise. 16, 40 pixels, circled, 8 pixels here. Oops, no, it's not circle, it is here. Maybe I'm going to do it secondary so we can see that I got a different style I can apply. And now I got, of course, Francesco, we have to create a different style.
I'll create a style. So that's perfect use case. I'm going to make it with the...
I can create it from here, but you can create it manually.
I'll do it so we can show the collaboration aspect.
Okay.
So now I'm going to choose just a different color on my side. I'm going to make it dark, and I'm going to say create button text dark. Okay, so now I created next to button text dark, button text, there's button text dark.
Okay, perfect.
And I'm going to rename what it was button text light. So
perfect. I'm going to apply it. Button text dark. Done. Okay, so we've got the buttons now. I can insert the secondary button with an icon, and I can change the text from home, or email.
This is one thing I want to mention, that live collaboration is great for having the files always in sync. And if Matteo were to save now, or I were to save, the document will be. I'm just now saving on my side. Actually, if Matteo can save, so you'll see also on his side what it looks like when you save.
Okay, I saved. Yeah, update created here. You can see, and now go it.
One thing we like to do is to also jump on a call, so that we can talk over what he's doing, what I'm doing. Other than obviously you can follow somebody, but if you're really collaborating, it's really nice to be able to either see each other's face on the side, or just having voice under. Especially these days, we were working remotely, or most of us. And in general, I think it's it makes it closer to sitting next to somebody, and but pair design, if you will. You might have heard of pair programming, which is what you usually have two developers side by side using either they have the same keyboard, each have a keyboard, or most of the times just they pass the keyboard to each other. Obviously nowadays you don't need to do that. This is the closest thing to pair design, where you are live collaborating through the cloud, but then also talking to each other. And so you can give feedback, and somebody can say, what do you think about this? And the other one, you can get immediate feedback. Web accessibility. Okay. Yep. So
Yeah.
we can speak to accessibility too. I just want to make sure, Matteo, where are you at with the buttons?
Yeah, I just created the button. I moved them inside the button page.
Perfect.
I believe that the next thing that we want to do is on another file. So if you want to take over for just a second to expose the things related with accessibility, then I can just go with the
Sounds good.
tables and data and cards and data sets.
Okay. I'll take over. Let me move this back. Move you down here. And I'll start sharing in a sec. Perfect. Let me know when you can see my screen.
We see it.
Perfect. So I think one of the question was, how do you deal with accessibility and what tools do you use? There's a few tools that have been around for some time. There are companions to Sketch. At the moment, Sketch doesn't have anything native that deals with giving you contrast ratio, for example, between this one of the starting point of accessibility. There's plenty of other things, of course, but that's from the visual standpoint is one of the things you should be paying attention to. And one tool that I love is called Clus. This one, you have to run it. You have to select two colors. Let me do it now separately here. I'm going to put a text layer. In Sketch, when you create a new text layer, we'll just use the last text properties used last. So if the moment you modify these properties, they will be used next. 4 layers instead. If I created, let's say, with R rectangle, this you can change those colors. So if, for example, you want to always apply not this color, but let's say a primary color here, let's say this, and you want that to be the default every time, you just go here, layer, style, set as default. So now every time I create a new rectangle, we'll use that as the default. Now, small tip about that. Now, let's say, obviously, if I have this textile here over this kind of background, I could tell that it's not legible, but there's tools like Class that will actually tell you how badly it is. In this case, you see it's not passing neither AA or AAA. And this tool allows you to basically manipulate foreground and background colors and to reach a level of contrast that's acceptable based on your standards. I think we should all strive to get things to have a really high contrast. It's not just good for people with vision issues, but for everybody. If something stands out better, a call to action is more likely to be clicked. If something blends in, probably anybody is going to have issues with it. So now this tool allows you to see you have a background here. I can manipulate the background, and if I move closer to the right, then start passing AA. The moment I go even further, I reach AAA. So now my next step, and I wish this plugin that hasn't updated yet, this aspect of would be nice to be able to pick a color variable from here. At the moment, it's not possible. So kind of what I can do is not only click OK, but go here and choose what is the closest primary color that matches that level of contrast. And here, primary color, this way. So now, and I can see that probably I'll select these 2 elements and rerun with Control-Shift-R, rerun the plugin, and I can see that the color I thought it was light enough in this scenario is actually not working. So this is what I could go do. Let's say I could do 2 things. I could decide to reach to this level here, copy this color, and now decide to make my lightest color in my library. And actually, can do it directly from here. I can choose to apply that color, primary 50, then click here. Click here. In the weld, there's a difference. If you pick on the right, you pick from color variables. If you click on the left, you actually get the color wheel, if you will. So here I click edit variable, and when pasting the value that I got from class, now if I click update, not only will update here, and now I know that it passes the test, but we'll have updated everywhere else I was using the color. So if I go back to my colors page, I see that this matches that color. And you can also see that this style also uses that color, and it's priority 50. So that's why you can have placeholder color variables and styles, and then as you discover and go through accessibility, ideally you do that from the very beginning. And there's some online tools that allows you to also match a certain level of contrast of typography and backgrounds. But in reality, either you're starting with a product you need to fix that already has been put out there, and especially in the startup world, happens all the time. But even legacy products where people were not paying too much attention before to accessibility, and now they have to. In some cases, also for legal reasons, like they could be sued, at least in countries like the US, you can be sued if your product is not accessible. So, but this is one of my favorite tools. There's other products like Stark. There's a paid product that allows you to check for also check for contrast at a larger scale at the layout level. And we can send those links later. I'm just gonna write it down. Stark and class. And then the same developer that created class also created what we're calling an assistant. Matteo, tell me when, and the assistant here, let's see, it's basically similar to the concept of plugin, but, and I apologize, I don't know if can you hear background noise on my side? No, okay,
no,
good.
it is fine.
So assistants are basically a set of rules you can add to your document, and rules go very well hand in hand with the concept of design systems, where you can define, okay, my color should be named this way, my style should be called this way, and it could check. And if somebody introduces a color and doesn't follow the naming convention, you can flag it to the designer, and the designer, okay, can be reminded of what the pattern should be, and then apply the right pattern. Or you can check things like accessibility. Now, I've never run it on this document, and this already found a bunch of stuff, right? And it's basically telling me that this shapes, in this case, this one is not passing command 2. It's not high enough contrast, and that's for sure. It's happening because I have a gray and a black together, and that gray is probably low too. So it's telling me that that color is not good enough. Now I want to, for here, this is telling me instead that this text over this background is also not passing. Now I could decide to set this to skip it and ignore it, or ignore the specific rule for the old document if it's something I know is not meant to be for, not to be used in the actual product. But keep this in mind. If this is flagged as AA, probably it could be that actually a designer or a developer might not be able to see these two colors together properly. So you might want to make your guides and documentation also accessible, because there might be other people in your team that would benefit from this. So I could decide to ignore it. But for this is not being called out at the moment because the contrast was high enough. If I go back to, let's say, a darker color, now that will pop up here in the list of elements too. Okay, it might take it a tiny bit, but that should pop up here now. Okay, let's give it a second. I don't know why it's not popping up here. Maybe I did something wrong myself, but I don't know. But you get the gist. So this is, you can create assistants to check anything you want in your document, can read any kind of value that is in the JSON file format of the sketch file. And it can really help clean up your files, make sure you don't get to the last minute to just solve, to solve some of the issues that you might be run into later on. You don't want to solve accessibility issues in production. You want to solve them prior. So that means less spinning wheels of developers, less spinning wheels. And also imagine if something is not accessible, means it's not very legible a lot of times. And that means if you are doing user testing and you're trying to test something bigger, like, do people even care about what I'm doing with this product? If they cannot read the call to action, there's no way they're going to give you good feedback. So you want to remove all these issues at the very beginning. Not sure why it is not calling out this specific thing, because obviously it's not accessible, but you get the gist. Matteo, do you want to jump on again on your side? Are you ready to?
Yep.
Do? Great.
Ready.
Let me clean this up.
Here we are. I'm sharing my screen now. Here we are. Perfect. So what we're going to talk about right now is not exactly related with design system, even if the things that we are going to see are part of a design system usually, but definitely they are part of your products and projects. So with the last version of Sketch that is gonna come, I'm using the beta version of it at the moment to expose it to you. Actually, with version 71, we added the concept of linked data. Which means that you can have JSON files structured, and those structure can be applied recursively on different items that can recall them. With the next version, which is 72, we added also the idea of being able to manage it for nested items like symbols here, and also to be able to, because what we have at the moment is they've been applied automatically only in a random order. Whether with the new version you can decide if you want to apply them randomly or not. So today I just created an example for you of what you can do with those data, because in many times one thing that we forget about design system is that the content can be also part of the design system itself. There are a lot of projects, particularly where you are heavily based on data, I don't know, dashboards with a lot of data, or you have to see to expose databases or tables, etc. You usually have data behind them. And actually, you can't use the user's data. You can use only fake data. And it is important to share all those data between the different designers so they can use them consistently across the system, etc. And this is something that Sketch is starting to do now. At the moment, you can share libraries. In the future, you will be probably able to share also the data sets. At the moment, if you go here, preferences, you can manage from the data item the list of data sets you have. And you can add your personalized one as well. It means that you've got a JSON file and you just drag and drop it into it. Just to expose to you my what I did, I have this cities dataset.json, and I've got a lot of images because I wanted also to use the images. I reduced them only in size or already in size, and also I format them so then they are all formatted in the same way. In this case, for 430s, and yeah, and actually this list is coming directly from the Wikipedia page about the most populous cities in the world. So what I did is I created a symbol here. I'm starting with the table. And in this symbol, I created it in a way that you've got a city item, this picture, the country item, a population value cell where I will put automatically the values and of the amount of population of this city, and those are just extra items that we can use and reuse as much as we want. And then I just created this table here, and repeating the same row plenty of times. I exposed to you also a bit the JSON file. The JSON file is just a list of things that are related together, because as you can see, this city, which is Delhi, has got always and only the country as India. It does have also this picture. It does have this population, and also I have other data that I'm not exposing in this table at the moment. So what we can do is to select a cell, and from here you can decide to apply data to this cell, and you can decide if you insert them randomly or if you want to insert them in order. I prefer to insert them in order, and actually I already did it because I cheated in advance for all the rows. So I can also select all the rows together Sorry. Here, now I got all the rows selected together. And if you hit Command Shift D, it will refresh the data from the data sets, and it will automatically add the all the data for me to all the rows. So I got Tokyo. This is the picture for Tokyo. Tokyo is in Japan, and this is the population. If I go to my data set, I can see that Tokyo is the first one in the list, is in Japan. This is the picture, and this is the population. So the data are right and correct. And this is done for all the rows automatically. And you can create what you need this way. What is interesting is that you don't need to, you can reuse the same data set to manage other things. So I created also, oh, Francesco, you did it for me, thank you. I also created...
just made a grid.
Yeah, thank you. So I also created this card that is reusing the same data. And actually, did you remove something?
Yeah, I just simplified it a little bit just so we can show.
I just wanted to show that I can add the different items here.
Sure.
But that's fine. Okay, so in this case, I created a card that actually is responsive. So I applied also how it should work when you are stretching it or automatically resize it. And then from here, I can do the same thing. I believe that we already applied no, we didn't apply the cities data set.
Yep.
So I should select all of them, and I should apply my city data set, and it will automatically update it for me. Did I remove the order? No, they are in the opposite order here at the moment.
Yep.
Because it followed the order in the layer list. But as you can see, the picture is automatically resized, and actually I can also take one and resize it, and it will automatically resize with the right size. But what is interesting is that I can also take this pic. I can select this one, add a few other columns, change the size of this one so we can see it, select all of them. Here we are. And now hit Command Shift D, and it will take a bit of time because there are a lot of pictures, and it will apply it to all the cards exactly in the right order, opposite order again, because this is the way we organize it. But what is interesting here is that if you look at this page here with the symbols, you can see that I imported from different libraries. In this case, of course, it was not the library that I just created right today because it was live. I couldn't do it live. But I imported here a lot of symbols coming from different libraries, and I created a new component here that is like a complex one. And going back to the original question from Igor, this is a way usually I see design system evolving during the time. So you find in a project that you need a component, and you develop the component for that project in connection with the design system team, and then that component can be developed and also upgraded to be a component part of the design system for the entire company, so they can be used in all the different projects, and not only the project it has been designed it for. So usually what happens is that you take components, put them together, and create something bigger, and that new component can be an organism. It depends on the name or the framework you're using. With Francesco, we are trying to be as framework agnostic as possible with the names of the items. So we are calling them components all the times, but can be confusing. So we can talk about this one as a template, as an organism, etc. And this one can be then upgraded to be part of the design system and can be shared within a library to all the different team members and projects that your company is managing. So this is something that I saw many times happening. And actually, I believe this is a very good way to evolve the design system and also to maintain it through the time. Because if a designer finds that a component has not been updated all through the time, and maybe Sketch or the tool you're using created a new feature that is managing those things in a better way or in a different way, and they should be upgraded. Of course, this is a very nice and perfect timing to update that single component, because I need to use it. And I can propose to use it in a different way, and you can create some workflows internally in your company, like some rules if you want. As a design system manager, I was managing the rules as well, in order to expose how to deal with those kind of things. For us, it was, okay, I found that I have this issue. I will mention it to the design system manager, the design system team. Okay, I've got this issue with this component. Do you have any plan to update it? Otherwise, I will detach the symbol and make it local to my document. I will update it, and I will expose to you and see if you can approve it. But this way, we were a lot faster to update and maintain the design system, particularly related with the actual designer's needs.
Right, and it's impossible to predict everything that your product will need over the course of a year or 2 years. So it's always good to start from something small, start getting adoption out there. It's hard to adopt something that has a ton of components. So it's better to, as Matteo was saying, starting from the most frequently used components, so that then you can, you're making an impact on the product, so you're already being used. And as you run into like this, the system might feel a little tight for some people because they might need a variation on that. That will bring up conversations. And the important thing is listening as a design system manager to the needs that are being expressed by the rest of the team, because the moment the team feels like the system becomes more a hindrance, it's like a blocker for them, and it's not letting them express what they want to express, that's when they're still boycotting the system. And so you want to be listening for this kind of alarm bells, making sure that if there's needs, listen, have conversations. It's also obviously impossible to have every designer contribute to the design system, but it's a good practice to make sure that you're listening and understand when maybe they need to make their own component is only going to be visible for their platform or for their team for whatever reason. Yes, there was something else that came up before. It was about, I think, exactly a request about when is the right time. How do you deal with requests? Listening is definitely a great tool, if you will, making sure you're having conversations and on a frequent basis to make sure that nobody's kind of brewing inside. It's like we're like, oh, I'm upset about something and I cannot accomplish what I need to accomplish. I see Ina wants to say something.
I'm just like, okay, if you have any questions, people, it is high time to type them right below our video, and we will cover your questions. That's why we're here. So yeah, please do it. Meanwhile, I want to thank you guys for amazing presentation. I really loved the way you interacted with each other and talked to the audience. That was very cool and engaging. And I hope you also enjoyed it.
Thank you. Yeah, we talk a lot. We talk to each other a lot. And,
we're Italians.
We are Italians. And so it kind of comes natural, but we really like to talk about these things, and we think we're also open to, if you have any more questions for us, feel free to reach out. We are Francesco and Matteo at sketch.com. So if you have any questions, feel free to write to us. You can find us on
advocacy at sketch.com.
Or design advocacy, and you can also find us on LinkedIn and Twitter. So
that is very cool. Okay, I see that we don't have any other questions, and I think it's time to wrap up. Or maybe you want to add something?
I think
I want to thank you. For having us, because for us is a happy time where we can do something like that, and we, as you can see, for us is fun. We always play with those things, and we are it is nice to be able to expose it to others.
Absolutely. Cool. And if you try something that we mentioned today, let us know if you think it helped or it didn't, or if you found a better way to do things. Both the design system world and tools and technology are constantly evolving. So things that we said today, some basic concept will definitely stay, keep working for the foreseeable future, but there might be something else that comes up, either with Sketch or CSS technology, or that you might be able to do slightly differently. So, exactly, make it a two-way thing. Send us feedback. We love feedback. We want to improve how we do these webinars as well, and looking forward to the next one too.
That's amazing. Okay, thank you a lot for your time and very, very cool tips. Grazie mille.
Thank you. Prego.
Now we're gonna stop the live translation and then we gotta start our party in behind the scenes.
Nice.
Thanks everyone for joining.
Be there. Maybe next time we'll be able to come in person.
Yeah, okay. Thanks everyone for joining. We're stopping.
Thank you.